Hi, everyone. This is Tori Vandelin with Prevent Connect. The podcast you're about to listen to is the final episode of a four-part series recorded from our recent web conference facilitated by Prevention Institute. That web conference is called Truth, Healing, and Transformation, Addressing Structural Racism and Building Multiracial Solidarity to Prevent Sexual and Domestic Violence. Previous episodes of this podcast are available, linked on this podcast page on our website.
What does multiracial solidarity look like in communities and in the movement? And we'll start with Nina.
So I think start with thinking about collective. Again, it's not just about you, but the collective. So in this case, we are thinking about collective liberation. So it's not just about liberate ourselves, but also others. And that with taking the first step, looking at your own racism first, because in the API community, we do have racism, right? And colorism. So we have to take a look at that first, acknowledge it, work on it, and then looking at the intersectionality, how oppression actually plays out in different communities, and then find commonalities, and then start reaching out and working together. I think work together is like the key. So it's not just in your head, it's a theory, but really working with uh, different group.
And I think that looking at your own racism first is so important too. So thanks for calling that out. Um, Arlene, what about for you? What does multiracial solidarity look like?
So before I go into my response, I just want to bring these names into this space, right? So Pearlie Gordon, age 93, Michelle Kasuk, age 50, Tanisha Anderson, age 37, Natasha McKenna, age 37. Her last words were, "You promised you wouldn't kill me." Maya Hall, age 27, Alexia Christian, age 26, Joyce Cornell, age 50, Ralkina Jones, age 37, India Kager, age 28, Keisha Michael, age 31, Corrine Gaines, age 23, Deborah Danner, age 66, Michelle Shirley, age 39, Carlina Lies, age 30. DeCynthia Clements, age 34, Pamela Turner, age 45, Atana Jefferson, age 26, Breonna Taylor, age 26, just to name a few. And if we're talking about multiracial solidarity and you don't know those names, you should know those names, right? Because we can't do gender based violence without addressing the other injustices that's happening in our communities that's causing harm to Black women. And just to make it clear, like Nina and Nicole said, like my liberation is connected to their liberation. So all of our liberation is connected. And the only people that benefit from Oppression Olympics, which we often play, are the oppressors. It's a part of their plan. We have to show up for each other on a consistent basis. And for non Black individuals, you need to start talking about anti Blackness in your communities, in your organizations, in your institutions. How do you benefit from anti Blackness? What are you really ready to let go? What is your role in condoning violence against Black people? What is silence and lack of action is really equating to alignment with the oppressors, right? So we need to start confronting racial biases in this movement, in our workplaces, in our communities, and start talking about anti-Blackness.
And Nicole, I know that you mentioned when we talked earlier that talking about anti-Blackness is something that's been happening in your work. Do you want to share about that and also your additional thoughts on multiracial solidarity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really critical for us to talk, in tribal communities, to talk about how anti-Blackness shows up in our communities. There's a real reason why our communities were pitted against each other, right? Because if we stay separate, we will never build power together, right? But that does not excuse us from dealing with our own shit, excuse my language. Like, we have to have those conversations about anti-Blackness and how it shows up in our tribal communities, because it does. You know, last summer when George Floyd was murdered, and you know, I live in Minneapolis, and it happened not far from my house. There's been a lot of conversations that have happened, and I've seen a lot of ways that our communities stood up in solidarity with each other. And I think we need to do more. We need to continue to build that, right? Not only in those moments when something happens, but in the quiet moments too. Not only when someone's looking, but when the cameras are turned off, right? Not only on social media, but in the streets and in our communities and in our homes, and all of the ways, and in the policies, all of the ways we have to show up for each other, and we have to have those conversations. You know, I think I'm really grateful to be in an organization that we're not afraid of having hard conversations, conversations that other people don't want to have, and we're okay pushing it a little bit farther and a little bit farther each time, and also to talk about the intersectionality that lives within each of us, right? And you know, many of us, I'm, you know, Native, and I'm Chinese, and I'm white, and so we have intersecting identities within ourselves, right? And so what does that look like when there were the murders down in Atlanta of Asian women? Like, that hit me different than maybe it hit some other people on my staff. And so having those conversations about what does that mean, and how are we showing up for each other, and again, going back to being a good relative with everyone. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done, and it's not easy. It's not going to be easy work, and it's not going to be the kind that happens on social media so we can pat ourselves on the back. It's going to be the real get your hands dirty kind of work. And some people are going to have to step back from leadership positions and let other people that need to lead.
And I think each of you has really given some good recommendations and learnings to support the work of, you know, those of us who are attending today. And hopefully there's some things that you're interested in diving deeper into. I'd like each of our guests to share, you know, what is your call to action for the, you know, all of us here today, and what is some food for thought to reduce harm? And Arlene gave this language around like food for thought to reduce harm, because maybe you aren't quite ready for the action, but what can you be doing to reduce harm? And I really liked that. So let's start with Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, all of what has been, you know, said, and really when I think about call to action, sometimes we are at a place where it starts small, and it's about having conversations with our family members or the people that are closest to us. And then, you know, expanding out, like it's about the auntie that says something really harmful, and having that conversation with her, right? And starting there as a practice to have conversations in other communities when it gets bigger. And then as we look at, you know, what are our policies look like, and how have we caused harm? We have to look at ourselves, because there's been times that all of us have caused harm. And so taking a look, I think, internally, and taking a look at, you know, how are we having those conversations with those in our circles, whether we're at the place where it's in our immediate circle, or whether we're, you know, we're going out.
What about for you, Nina? What's your kind of call to action, food for thought?
It's understanding that the relational nature of this work and how it's connected. We are all connected, and the issue also connected. And to see the issue like the truth. So don't sugarcoat it, just see it as it is. I know it's need bravery. I know it's not easy, but like what Nicole said, have a conversation, you know, with your family first. Unpack the racism, the harm, the trauma, even if it's hard, do it, step by step. And another thing is again that this Asian racism is not new, and some of the a lot of organization actually have been working unpacking this, supporting survivor for a long time. See them, acknowledge that they've been working on this issue, and support them. And another thing is bring the youth into the movement, because I think they have a different way of looking at the issue, and I think they have a different trauma experience than us. So uh, can see things differently. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the point around connecting to those who have been doing the work over a long time, that's so important because it's not about just trying to start something new. There are people who have been doing this. And I know Arlene mentioned earlier around connecting to different movements, and I think there's so many opportunities there. Arlene, what's your call to action and food for thought?
All right. So for Black women and people of color that's participating, I would say create your wellness plan, reevaluate it, reassess it often. Recently, I participated in a webinar, and the sister said the only person who benefits from our demise is the oppressor. It's a part of their plan for us not to be well. So create a wellness plan. I'll start with that. And then I'll say believe Black women, trust Black women, and listen to Black women. Food for thought. What are you willing to let go? And who are you willing to become in order to achieve multiracial solidarity? Acknowledge the contributions of Black communities, acknowledge the ongoing contributions of Black women in the movement. And again, food for thought. Ask yourself, how are you contributing to the dismissal and silencing of Black voices, Black joy, and Black leadership? And lastly, I'll end with a Maya Angelou quote: do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. So, how can you be better now that you know better?
I love that quote. That's a great ending.
Thanks for listening. Follow along with other Prevent Connect podcasts at preventconnect.org/podcast.